How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 1 of What If Deku Had a Leveling System. And now, before I begin, I would like to ask you all to please consider subscribing, as it really helps this channel out, and you can even be notified when the other parts of this series do end up coming out. So anyway, Izuku's going to have a quirk called a leveling system, and now Izuku's power is going to be based off of the power in the manga Solo Leveling, but it's not going to be a one-for-one copy of it. However, it's still going to have a lot of the characteristics of the power from that manga. So Izuku's going to be able to complete missions, challenges, quests that will allow him to level up using XP. And so when Izuku levels up, he's going to receive a special coin that he can use to redeem, making one of his stat lines stronger, say for strength, defense, intelligence, and all of that. However, Izuku can also upgrade these stat lines by also completing quests or just doing basic workouts, say for push-ups for strength, or just reading a book for intelligence. Izuku can also earn normal coins through quests as well, which can allow him to buy special items within the shop. So, now that you all have a basic understanding and knowledge of Izuku's quirk/power, let's begin. The cries and screams of a baby echo throughout a hospital room as a doctor hands this child over towards its mother. As the mother smiles down the child, they know that the coming days can only go up from there. However, this isn't our green-haired protagonist. 5 years after this event of this dull blue-haired baby being born, our green-haired hero would finally be born, as the doctor hands over Izuku over towards his mother, Inko Midoriya. Years would end up passing as we now see a 4-year-old Izuku sitting up in his bedroom, just sitting in his bed, as all of a sudden his alarm goes off as he flies up from his bed, completely now awake. He was still drowsy and just a little bit not there, as he was still quite sleepy. However, the anticipation and excitement that was Izuku's birthday was flooding Izuku's mind, and as soon as his alarm clock rang, Izuku would jump up out of his bed, pulling the covers off of him before running over towards his mother's room, pounding on the door. "Mom, Mom!" Izuku would yell, as his mother would slowly open the door, sleepily looking down at Izuku. "What, Izuku?" she would say, yawning in the process. "It's my birthday! Can we finally go to the quirk doctor's office? I can't wait to see what my quirk is!" Izuku would say, jumping and jittering all throughout, as he was insanely excited, as his mother would look softly at him before laughing. "Oh, Izuku, it's still quite early. The quirk doctor's office doesn't open for another hour," Inko would say, looking at one of the clocks in the hallway. Izuku would look down sadly before saying, "Oh, can you at least make breakfast first? It is my birthday after all," he would say, completely excited. He loved his mother's cooking and he wanted the best of the best for his birthday. Inko would just laugh, saying, "Of course, Izuku. I'll be down in a minute," she would say, shutting the door to go get changed out of her pajamas, as Izuku would rush down the stairs before sitting at the kitchen table, just jumping up and down in his seat, completely excited for what the day had to bring going on forward. It could only go up from there, Izuku would tell himself. As all of this would end up be happening, Inko would walk down the stairs, making Izuku's favorite breakfast, as finally, the hour would pass as Inko would set up an appointment before driving Izuku off towards the quirk doctor's office, placing him in the car as they would then drive off. "What do you think my quirk's going to be?" Izuku would excitedly ask, as his mother would only go silent. That's quite the question, Izuku. Your father has a fire quirk, and I have a telekinesis quirk. So maybe a stronger fire telekinesis quirk, maybe? You could definitely become a hero with something like that, don't you think?" she would say, as Izuku would pump his fist in the air, excitedly yelling, "Yeah!" as they would pull up into the doctor's office, as she would park the car, getting Izuku out of his car seat before walking him into the doctor's office, sitting him down before saying that they were here to just the clerk sitting in the front of the office. As a couple minutes would end up passing, the doctor would open the doors, looking down at a clipboard. Izuku Midoriya, can you please follow me? He would say as Inko and her child would stand up before walking off to go to the Quirk Doctor's office with the Quirk Doctor. As Inko and Izuku would sit down now in a private room, the doctor would take a couple of tests before going off to just do some sampling and all of that, just to try and find out what Izuku's quirk could possibly be, and even if he does have a quirk. However, they don't have quite the technology just yet to get a precise, just exact answer on what Izuku's quirk is going to be, meaning it will most likely just awaken in the coming days after Izuku turns 4. All they know is that they can test to see, taking some x-rays and blood samples, just to see if Izuku has a quirk or not. 5 minutes would end up passing as the doctor would come in smiling or leaning back up against the door after shutting it. "Well, I have great news, you two," the doctor would say, making Izuku jump up and down, shaking the seat, as his mother would place a hand on his shoulder, just as if signifying that she wants him to calm down. As he would be shaking in his seat, the doctor would then just laugh. "Young Izuku here does have a quirk. We don't know what exactly his quirk will be. My guess is a mix between his father and your quirk, Inko. However, our guess might not always be right, of course. It could be possibly anything. If he gets lucky, it could be a crazy powerful quirk like All Might's, or if he doesn't, he could get a weaker kind of quirk. Like a very weak telekinesis quirk. Not trying to, just make you mad or anything, Inko. You didn't really get the luck of the draw." "Yeah, I know," Ink would say, smiling, happy that her son had a quirk, as Izuku would jump in the air, pumping both his fists up. "Yeah, I have a quirk," he would excitedly exclaim, as his mother would just laugh. "You do have a quirk, Izuku," she would say before reaching down as if wanting Izuku to grab her hand as Izuku would do so. So they would then walk off, where Izuku would then get back in the car, where they would then drive off back towards their house, where Izuku would then have one of his happiest birthdays, with him now knowing he's going to have a quirk. The next day, Izuku would end up walking into class, as would end up seeing Bakugo Katsuki being surrounded by a bunch of other people in his preschool class. Izuku would end up asking one of them what all of the deal was, as they would end up exclaiming that Bakugo has awakened his quirk. Izuku would jump up, just trying to look over everyone's shoulders and heads, where he would end up seeing Bakugo Katsuki sitting there in the middle with his palms facing up, with sparks flying out of his hands. As he would look down excitedly on towards them, Izuku would end up yelling, "Whoa, you have such an amazing quirk, Bakugo!" would yell, as many of the other preschoolers and Izuku's friends around him would end up agreeing with him. Some of them would end up turning to Izuku and asking him what his quirk is. However, Izuku would only shake his head. "The doctor said I have a quirk, I just haven't awakened it yet." Many of them would nod their heads in understanding, as many of them haven't even just gotten their quirks awakened yet either. When Izuku would end up going home, he would end up walking up to his room to read book, as he would end up sitting there reading a book, where he would end up seeing just a screen flash above the screen, where it would end up saying his intelligence had leveled up. As Izuku looked down at it, just wondering what that meant, before an entire screen would end up popping up, showing all of his stats and his overall level. His overall level was 2, and his intelligence stat was 2 as well. Izuku would look at it, just intrigued by it, before saying, "Wait, this is my quirk." He would run downstairs yelling, "Mom, I awakened my quirk." He would yell as his mother would look questioning on towards Izuku, as Izuku would say, look, there's a screen in front of me. He would say as Inko would up asking Izuku, what do you mean? There's no screen there. And she would look on exactly where Izuku was pointing, however, there was nothing there at all. Izuku would end up sitting down in frustration, wondering why his own mother couldn't see his quirk. However, Inko would end up just sort of laughing. Izuku, don't be frustrated. It just must be a quirk that others can't see, only you can. Izuku would say, yeah, you must be right. This quirk looks awesome, Izuku would say, completely mesmerized by all of the different understandings and words all throughout this page right in front of Izuku. However, Izuku just didn't fully understand all of it. You gotta remember, Izuku's only 4 at the time. So Izuku is going to end up just clicking random buttons, experimenting with his power, looking for different things, and just trying to look to see what his quirk fully is. Izuku would end up accidentally clicking on a just sidebar that would end up being labeled as quests. When Izuku would click this, all of a sudden a bar would end up popping up saying achievement unlocked, saying that he had just unlocked a quest. And so Izuku would look at the quest, seeing that it was called a daily quest, meaning Izuku was going to have to complete it daily, or else he would end up getting negative XP. Izuku would, or just negative XP, causing him to level up just backwards and causing him to lose levels, just sort of as an extra motivation to level up even further. Izuku would look at this, reading it intently, as he was quite the smart 4-year-old. However, he wasn't no genius. He was still quite smart, as his mother had him reading books all the time, so he could read fluently. However, he might not understand what a lot of words might mean. So Izuku was reading this, he would end up seeing that he had to do just certain challenges for this daily quest to be complete, and he'll get a certain amount of XP that will most likely level him up. As Izuku would be reading it, it would end up saying that he has to do 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, 10 squats, and 10 jumping jacks. It would end up seeming quite easy to most of us. However, Izuku's only 4 years old, and this would be quite challenging to him. Izuku would end up looking questioningly on towards his mother before asking her what a push-up is, as Inko would end up just saying, oh, here, let me show you, as she would just demonstrate, as Izuku would continue on asking what these certain things were, as she would end up just demonstrating them for Izuku. As Izuku would end up just pointing down where his screen was, forgetting that his mother couldn't see it. My quirk says I have to do 10 of those every single day, or something like that. Inko would look on towards Izuku in a questioning manner before just saying, okay, why don't you go ahead and begin? She would say, giving Izuku his tennis shoes, as he would end up putting them on and tying them, as Izuku would end up completing the exercise, or Izuku's exercise shoes, or his just daily shoes, whatever you want to call them. So as Izuku would end up putting those on, he would complete them, as Izuku would end up seeing he leveled up even further. His strength had leveled up, and he was now level 3 in strength, and his defense had leveled up to level 2, tying with his intelligence. As would be happening, Izuku would end up seeing that his overall level was 5. Izuku would smile, just getting a sense of accomplishment. As years would end up passing, we now see a 10-year-old Izuku stretching, being prepared to go out and do some more exercises. He had gotten to the point now that he had to do 100 sit-ups, 100 push-ups, 100 just squats, and just even more, like 100 jumping jacks and other types of exercises, a 10-mile run, all of that, which seems quite hard for a 10-year-old, but Izuku has gotten his strength stats and all of his other stats to be quite high, and so he was quite the strong 10-year-old, making it quite easy for Izuku to complete this. However, that 10-mile run was a pain in the butt every single day for Izuku. So every time he would barely be wobbling and just completely tired. However, Izuku turned out to have quite the stamina because of this. Now, Izuku also made sure not to leave out his intelligence either, reading books every single day and also watching educational videos. His mother made sure that he did that and not to skip out on it. So with that, Izuku would end up completing that quest for the day. However, we end up cutting to see that same dull blue-haired boy that we saw at the start of this What If. We see him walking down the street, going under a bridge, as all of a sudden a sewer drain would explode out of nowhere, sending it flying up, hitting the roof of the bridge, or the bottom of it, that is, the roof to the boy that was under it, as all of a sudden sludge and ooze would end up coming right out of the sewer, piling out before finally two eyes would end up materializing out of nowhere. "Ah, what do we have here?" the sludge monster would say, as the boy would only look on in complete shock. "Who are you?" he would say questioningly. "Oh, please, I don't have time to bother with your useless questions. You're gonna help save me from that stupid yellow-haired hero," he would say, launching himself towards the blue-haired person that was known as Shigaraki. As Shigaraki would end up trying to get out of the way, the sludge villain would end up just capturing him in its sludge, sending sludge going right down into his system, trying to take a hold of his body. However, before that could fully happen, All Might would appear out of nowhere, launching himself up out of the sewer before punching the sludge away from Shigaraki. As Shigaraki would look on in complete shock and amazement at who was now All Might, the #1 hero, standing in front of him. As Shigaraki would look on in complete shock and excitement, you would remember how he had a question for All Might. As All Might would collect all of the sludge villain into a 2-liter bottle, Shigaraki would finally ask All Might the question that he'd been meaning to ask him. "All Might, do you think I could become a hero even if I have a villainous quirk?" Shigaraki would say, as he would end up looking around him before grabbing just a can of Sprite or something that was lying on the ground. Before touching it with all 5 fingers, it would end up disintegrating. All Might would look down at Shigaraki's power before thinking for a moment. "Your power, young man, it's quite the dangerous one, I assume. The fact that you can disintegrate anything just by touching something with 5 fingers. I fear you might accidentally hurt or kill someone, even. I would suggest staying out of the heroes, or just staying out of the hero career. It might be too dangerous for others. Sure, you could become a hero with it, but I just think it'd be too dangerous. I would suggest otherwise," All Might would say before jumping off, as Shigaraki would look on in shock before clenching his fists. "I'll show you, All Might. I'll show you." As Shigaraki, from that day, would end up having an undying hatred against All Might, as how dare All Might say he couldn't become a hero? How dare he? "I can become a hero. I can," Shigaraki would tell himself, as 10 months from that day would end up passing, as we now see the blue-haired boy stretching in front of the UA campus, as he would end up taking the written exam, and would then take the hero exam, which would be the same exam Izuku had taken in canon My Hero Academia. As this would be happening, Shigaraki would rush out into the city, easily destroying the robots using his disintegration quirk, easily touching all 5 of the robots, or just all the robots with his 5 fingers, dodging many of their attacks. Remember, they are robots and not designed to hurt anyone. So Shigaraki would rack up points and points, as he would end up passing the UA entrance exam, making it even into Class 1A, with his teacher being Shota Aizawa. So, we now cut to 6 months after Shigaraki made it into UA. really done many combat fighting with their quirks, mostly just training their quirks to become more powerful and more powerful. They hadn't done a one-on-one with their quirks just yet, mostly doing fistfights without them. So we now see Shigaraki standing in front of a hero wannabe. As the match would end up beginning, Shigaraki would launch himself towards him before placing all 5 fingers around his body, as it would end up disintegrating further and further, as Shigaraki just would be able to stop. As he would end up holding it, he would let go, as the boy would end up clenching his stomach in pain, walking backwards before falling down to the ground, as I saw would rush in, calling for Recovery Girl, who would come in, grabbing the boy and healing him as much as she could. However, the boy wouldn't ever be the same again, having who put up the gloves or the shoes, not being able to continue on his just bout to becoming a hero. He just couldn't anymore. He was too injured, and he would never be the same after Shigaraki ended up injuring him. And so Shigaraki would be seen sitting in the principal's office as Nezu would look down at Shigaraki. I'm sorry, Shigaraki, but you're expelled from UA. You can't be injuring students like that. You almost killed him. What would the press think? What would the parents think if you killed someone? I just can't take that risk anymore, Shigaraki. That's why I'm expelling you from UA. As you would say, as Shigaraki would clench his fists before slamming the chair back behind him, shattering it into tiny pieces of wood, as he would end up walking through the door, slamming it further, before looking back at Nezu or pointing at him. You'll regret this, Shigaraki would say, as Nezu would end up putting his hand to his forehead, as Shigaraki would end up slamming the door behind him. Nezu couldn't help but feel that he had made a very bad mistake. He just didn't know why. As that would be happening, Shigaraki would end up rushing out of UA, where All For One would end up meeting him. The Darth Vader wannabe would look down at Shigaraki before offering him a hand, asking him if he wanted to join him. All he wanted to do was become a hero, and yet the society rejected him. They couldn't accept him for who he was, with his villainous quirk, and so why not show them by becoming what they'd said he'd become all along? As Shigaraki would end up taking this hand, joining sides with the villain, not understanding what he had done, just accepting a contract that he wouldn't want to continue on later down the line. We cut back to the 10-year-old Izuku continuing on leveling up, gaining up his stats, as he would even purchase some weapons, like a certain sword that had just demonic energy to it, so if Izuku were to slash you, it would just not be able to heal, completely stopping any type of healing at all from it. Or it could also have a blood drain effect, so if you were to, say, cut off someone's finger, an endless stream of blood would end up flowing out of that wound until you were to be just dry of all blood, being killed by it. However, Izuku could cancel this effect by putting the sword away. As long as he had the sword out, the effect would continue. Izuku was also able to purchase another sword, which was an angelic sword / katana, which if you were to slash you in sort of an injury, it wouldn't injure you, however, it would heal you. However, this only goes to such an extent, and that injury can only sort of heal other injuries that have been done by a sword that Izuku has purchased, basically making the angelic sword useless unless Izuku was training with someone with the demonic sword and he had to heal someone. Otherwise, it's just a normal katana that Izuku can use. However, Izuku wouldn't like to use these types of swords as was insanely hard to handle. Izuku could barely wield them. Izuku couldn't even wield them at 10. Sure, he had been able to purchase them, that's because he saved up his coins to buy them. However, Izuku could barely Izuku couldn't even hold them yet. And so 4 years/5 years would end up passing, and Izuku would still barely be able to hold them, even after growing a crap ton. Izuku was at around level 65, and the and Izuku would and the max level would be around 100, which in order to do that, you would have to do crazy amounts of quests that only someone who, say, was possibly 30 or 40 with this power could achieve. So a 15-year-old Izuku wasn't going to be able to get close to it. Remember, the levels get slower and harder to get as time passes. However, that doesn't mean Izuku's stats aren't going to be high at all. They aren't going to be as high as that. Izuku can level up his strength stat, defense stat, way above 100. They can go way higher than that. However, his level maxes out at 100, while the stat lines max out at 200. So Izuku can level up even further than that through his stats. And so we now see a 14-year-old Izuku walking into the UA campus, as all of a sudden his foot would catch on a rock, as his head would flick back before falling down onto the ground, as a young net-haired girl would end up touching Izuku on the back, as Izuku would end up seeing that he was just floating in mid-air. He would end up looking around just in complete shock, as she would end up saying something after putting all of her fingertips together. Izuku would hear a loud release be yelled, as he would end up hitting down the ground, except it wouldn't be as hard as it would have been if Izuku just wasn't stopped. So Izuku would end up looking back before thanking the girl, putting out his hand, as she would end up taking the handshake, shaking it, as Izuku would end up speaking. "Oh, hello, I'm Izuku Midoriya. Thanks for saving me back there," Izuku would say, as the girl would only just laugh. "Yeah, I'm Chaco Uraka. It's no problem," she ended up saying. Izuku would wish her luck, as she would do the same. They would then go their separate ways. She was in the second group along with Izuku, so when they went their separate ways, Izuku would end up going to the auditorium, as she would end up going to the wrong way. Izuku would end up stopping her, as she was 5 feet away in the wrong direction, as Izuku would end up asking her, do you happen to be group 2 by any chance?" Izuku would say, as she would nod her head. "Oh, the auditorium's this way," Izuku would say, as she would quickly nod her head, giving an awkward thank you before rushing past Izuku, completely just nervous and awkward, with her face a bright red, just being embarrassed by her mistake. So with that, we now see Izuku walking over towards the auditorium as well, as he would end up sitting down in one of the seats, as we end up seeing, after 5 minutes, President Mike, the loud hero, step up onto the stage. "Good morning, UA entrance exam examinees. I'm President Mike, one of the teachers you might be seeing here at UA if you happened to making it. So, anyway, let's begin with the written exam. You all will have a long 5 hours to complete this 10-page exam. So, I suggest you get to it. I'll have these helpers pass out the exams. Once you get your test, you may begin," President Mike would yell. Izuku would receive his test from one of the volunteer helpers, as he would then begin, finishing it in a cool 4 hours before many of the other examinees that happened to be there. However, there was one black-haired lady that had managed to beat and pass the exam in under 3 hours. Izuku would be shocked at the level of brilliance he had managed to do it in. However, Izuku wouldn't be able to just ask her how smart she happened to be, and wouldn't even see her for the rest of the exam, as she would end up finishing it, turning it in before walking out in a hurry towards another part of the UA campus. So once the 5 hours would end up being up, Izuku would end up seeing all of the tests be passed back to the front if they hadn't finished it in time, so President Mike would end up beginning the hero examinee or the hero exam just talk and explaining it all, saying that there's going to be three types of robots: a 3-pointer, 2-pointer, and 1-pointer. And they're going to be different levels of difficulty, how many points they go up. However, a shiny blue-haired boy would end up standing up before yelling at President Mike, "Wait, President Mike, on this pamphlet here, it's that there's another fourth robot. I'd be extremely ashamed if such a prestigious school managed to make a mistake on such an easy task," he would say, flicking the pamphlet in his other hand. As President Mike would just look down, wanting to keep that robot a secret, but now couldn't, just hoping to keep the UA reputation. So President Mike would end up saying, "Oh, yes, that's the 0-pointer. It's mostly just a distraction, so I'd say just to avoid it. You really don't have to beat it. It gives you no advantage or points at all. So just avoid it," he would say, as the blue-haired boy would sit down, as the rest of the examinees would end up being funneled into just a hallway where they would end up just being seen by the other people that had just finished the hero exam. However, these people would end up being flooded in from the entrance since the hero exam was only 30 minutes long. All of these people finished it way early since it's only 30 minutes, and so they had to go home and then come back for the 5-hour-long test. So we now see Izuku standing in the hallway as the doors and gates would end up slowly coming to an open. Izuku would end up rushing out before getting out his demonic katana. As Izuku would say, "I guess this is now a good time to use it." Shakily, Izuku would end up slashing the katana as dark energy would end up seeping out of it and would end up consuming the one of the 1-pointers completely whole. Izuku would be completely in shock at the power of this sword before putting it away, not wanting to hurt anyone else. Also, Izuku had used up half of his power doing that, as it was insanely hard to handle. So with that, Izuku would end up just punching robots from there, as his defense and resistance stats were quite high. Izuku had used many of his special coins on his defense/resistance stats, as it was quite hard to level that up compared to intelligence and strength, as those you could do push-ups or read a book, but he didn't know quite how to do the defense and resistance, not wanting to be punched every single day. Sure, he could do that, but that can only go so far. So Izuku punching these robots would end up doing that, as he would end up just easily getting around 50 or so points punching these robots, as all of a sudden he would hear a cry for help. As the ground would start shaking beneath him, he would look on it to see massive 0-pointer towering overhead. As Izuku would end up looking on in complete shock, he would end up sprinting on towards the 0-pointer, getting out his demonic katana, knowing he wasn't going to be able to defeat it just with a punch. And that is where this part 1 comes to an ending. I hope you all did enjoy part 1 of this series. Once again, please consider subscribing, as it really helps this channel out, and you can be notified when the other parts of this series do end up coming out. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.